Hi, I'm Mike, and I'd like to interview women in technology who've played a pivotal role in my journey to become a Salesforce developer. Today, I'm interviewing Deawna Alfonsi. I've been programming for kind of a long time. I want to say I started when I was about 9 years old, and I was programming on my 8-bit home computer. For a long time, programming has been a part of my life, and my career has evolved over the course of many, many years. Deawna, however, has had a completely different background. Deawna's been programming for only a handful of years, yet she's become one of the most capable and one of the most skilled people I've ever worked with. In our interview, Deawna refers to me as a mentor, seemingly unaware that the skills that she brings to the table are skills that I aspire to have as well. She is super, super organized, genuinely interested in delivering quality, measurable value to the client. She's also a very, very patient person, very compassionate, very thoughtful, and she's an amazing friend. While I've definitely helped her overcome some technical obstacles from time to time, she's helped me overcome things like communication obstacles, even emotional obstacles, self-doubt obstacles, the list goes on. I almost sort of worry that there's a little bit of an imbalance in our give and take relationship. In summary, I just absolutely love Deawna, and I'm really grateful to have enjoyed a lot of career successes with her as my partner, and I'm enjoying many more. Without further delay, here she is, Deawna Alfonsi. Deawna, thank you so much for being here to chat with me this afternoon. I got a lot to say, and I've got some questions to ask, and I'll just jump right into it. But first, you can get us started by telling us, who you are and what you do for a living, and whatever else that you think is sort of relevant to introduce yourself to the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for having me. My name's Deawna Alfonsi, and for those that kind of struggle with remembering that, can always call me D. But my title right now is Senior Software Developer. So I code on the Salesforce platform, and I absolutely love it and have a passion for it. I'm also a mother. I have two boys and a stepdaughter, and I have a dog, a French bulldog named Ace, because that's totally relevant to what I do.
It is actually, it is because it means that you're not only full-time developer, you're full-time at home with a full house of kids and a dog. So I get that. I totally get that. No, that's definitely relevant. I'm glad you mentioned that. And one of the other things that's worth mentioning that we didn't cover that I think is probably key to your intro is that you don't necessarily like it when people mispronounce your name because it has sort of an unusual spelling. But of course, that means that becomes one of my most favorite things to do is to deliberately mispronounce your name. But for the
Yes, I
sake,
do like to
I do,
antagonize in that way.
I do. But for the sake of this video, I will not do that this time.
Thank you.
Um,
Appreciate it.
so we know that you're a software engineer on Salesforce, but you haven't always been a software engineer working on Salesforce. I'd love to know
Mhm.
what you were doing before you started doing that full time. I mean, let's start there because it's sort of a multi-part question. So before you were a developer, you were doing what?
Well, immediately before being a developer, I was actually my own business owner in the fitness world. So I was a fitness expert, a fitness business owner, and now it's about all things fitness. So I was a group exercise instructor, I was a personal trainer, I was a studio owner, a nutrition specialist, had e-commerce fitness products, kind of everything under one big fitness umbrella, completely and totally unrelated to technology, but that is what I did for quite a while.
Right, right. And how long were you doing that?
I was my own business owner for about, well, 12 years.
Okay.
But I've been in the fitness because I actually still teach fitness classes to this day.
Oh,
So I've
okay.
been in that industry for over 20 now, about 25 maybe, who's
Great,
counting.
great. And how is business going for you? I mean, I guess the question really is, what was it about what you were doing that sort of made you think, well, maybe I need to be looking at something else, or maybe there's something else that I can be doing with my time?
Well, I absolutely love fitness and had a passion for it, but I had been in it for a long time and I was starting to get into a different stage in life and just wanted to get very realistic about my prospects going into, midlife and things like that and whether fitness was where it was going to be for me. I also had a family that was dependent on me supporting me, or that was depending on me to be supported. But one of the things that I was doing this like self-help exercise, looking at a book, and it encouraged you to take an inventory of your latent interests. things that you may have talent at but never pursued, things you kind of have an aptitude for, maybe things people told you were good at through the years, and just kind of brainstorm. And of course, one of the things on that list for me was computers. That's about all I put at the time because it was very
Right.
broad. But
Right.
I knew that I had, and I kind of realized that was eye opening for me because I realized I had an aptitude for it. Because even in the fitness business, which would seem completely unrelated, because I was in business for myself, I had a website, I had back end systems that needed integrated, and I would get really involved in setting all that up to the point where I wanted to spend my time doing that and had to say, no, Deanna, you can't spend all day doing this. You have to get back into fitness because that's where you generate your revenue.
Uh-huh.
So, and I used to kid around with my clients and say to them, if I ever had a second career, it'd be something with computers. I know it. So that was kind of an exercise that helped me realize that, what would happen if I explored that? So that's actually the very beginning what took me in that direction.
That's interesting. That's interesting. We've talked a lot. I don't think I ever knew that. That's great. So you were pretty hands-on with a lot of like the website and the e-commerce elements of your business?
Right. Yeah. So, you have to set up the e-commerce, the shipping, the payment processing, and, it was more configuration at the time, but I
Uh,
just could have spent my whole entire day trying to figure out those systems and how I wanted them to work and getting my website to be just how I wanted it to be and all
I
of that.
see. I see. Okay. So as you're messing with stuff like this, Deanna, how are you getting up to speed with what you need to do to accomplish those technology goals? Like, are you like scouring Google or what were you doing to kind of, you know,
Well, once I realized that, hey, this might be an area I want to explore, and hey, if I switch right now, I still have enough time to get a whole other career, in it. The first thing I did was I signed up for some classes, online classes at the local community college, because really it was just exploratory. To say you want to do something with computers is pretty vast. So I did a class they were all intro classes, cybersecurity, information technology, and programming. And I absolutely fell in love with programming. That was it. I knew this is the path I want to go down. So I
yeah,
narrowed it down to that. And then from there, I was like, okay, how do I do this? How do I learn to program? And I looked at a lot of different options, right? Should I get a master's in, computer science? Should I do a boot camp? I looked at all the ranges of ways I could do this. And in the end, I decided to do a boot camp because let's remember, the stage and phase I'm at in my life. I'm a mother. I need to make money now, not later. And it was one of the best decisions I ever could have made. So I did a 14-week fully immersive boot camp. I went to Tech Elevator in the Pittsburgh campus, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and it was an absolute life changer.
that's great. That's great. So
Mhm.
that got you that hands-on, that got you realizing that, software development was not only something that interests you, but it's something that you're very capable of doing. How did you take that sort of general knowledge that you were getting from these boot camps that were probably a little bit more geared towards just standard web development, right?
Mhm.
And take that and sort of parlay that into something more specific towards Salesforce. How did that transition take place?
Yeah, so actually, when I was in that program, in the online course, I did Java, intro to Java. In the boot camp, I did C#.net.
Mhm.
And one of the main points of this program is not just to teach you how to enter the industry as a full stack junior developer, but also to place you in a job as a full stack junior developer. So it was equally important, and the success rates of the school and the program were on their ability to get you placed. And so they would have employers come in and talk to us. And ironically, the employer that I really wanted to go to, that was my number one choice, they offered a Microsoft division, which, of course, responsible for C#.net. I thought, oh, well, that'd be perfect. But they ended
Right.
up interviewing me for Salesforce. And years ago, I had actually been in outside sales, and we used Salesforce back when near the beginning, before Salesforce is the gargantuan monster that it
Right.
is today. So I knew it from an end user perspective. I never dreamed that I'd be working on it from this end. But when they interviewed me, it was in their Salesforce division. And so I got hired, and that actually began my Salesforce journey. And as I continued on and learned more about it, I became more and more invested in it. And now, like, that's all I do. Salesforce all day, every day.
That's great. That's great. Yeah. And you do it well, by the way. And we've been doing this together now for a few years, successfully, I might add. So that's awesome. I'm glad that it worked out that way. I'd love to talk to you a little bit more about what it's like to be a woman in technology in general. I mean, obviously, it's a subject that fascinates me, and you're going to have a lot more insight than I am, certainly. So given a time frame of say about 20 years, right? I would say that over the course of the past 20 years, um, women are a lot more visible in technology than they were a couple of decades ago. And it's not to say that they weren't in technology. I worked with plenty of women who were in positions as like business analysts, systems analysts, project managers, and that sort of thing. I didn't see too many women in hardware and network infrastructure, IT, and software engineering. I definitely do now, but 15, 20 years ago, not as much. So I'm curious to know, you know, do you feel like I would identify it as a rare instance 20 years ago, not so much now. How do you feel now? Do you still feel like it might be something that's rare, or do you think like it's a little bit more normalized at this point?
I definitely think that there's been evolution, and today we probably see more women than we ever have. That being said, it's probably still in certain areas of technology, they're still quite the minority, right? So, for example, in 2019, when I was attending the boot camp program, the stats that they gave to us at that time were specifically for developers, right? For female developers.
Yeah,
They comprised, if I recall correctly, 15% of developers, which is a very, very, very small number. And I remember in my particular class, I was the only female throughout that whole experience because we got broken up into two groups. And the group
yeah.
I ended up with, I was the only female in that group. The other
And
few
that
females
was
ended up
what year was that? I'm sorry. Was that 29?
2019.
Wow. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so that was in the spring of 2019. So, and that's not that long ago that the stats were
Right.
presented. So I'm sure that there is quite an increase based on 20 years ago, but I also feel like there's so much more potential to go.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, that's a great observation.
Mhm.
What about the acceptance or the inclusion of women in tech? Because one of the things that I can recall was, and this is maybe, 10, 12 years ago, I had the opportunity to hire the first woman as a developer on our team. And I thought that was such a big milestone. I was pretty excited about it. And people were very open and welcoming about that too. I mean, we had a number of lady executives on the corporate hiring team who were like, oh, this is wonderful news. This is great. But we also had just as many people who seemed skeptical, like, oh, is she going to know? And I'm like, wow. I mean, the uncertainty that people were expressing over the fact that we were hiring a female programmer, I thought like 12 years ago, I'm like, gosh, that seems really strange to me. I sense less of that now, but I'm also a man, so I'm not going to see it. I'm curious to know if you see it. Do you ever feel as though there is skepticism that you encounter professionally regarding your skills or your qualifications that you feel your male counterparts don't experience?
Um, Absolutely, that has happened. Now, I will say I do have the good fortune. The current company I work with, right, is owned by a woman CEO.
Yeah,
And, True Summit Solutions, I'm sure you're quite familiar. We were, but, they really emphasize valuing women and women's values. So being with a company that has that philosophy and not just in their words, but in their actions certainly helps my day to day experience. So, when it comes to my immediate colleagues in my current position, I think that I experience the level of respect that I would like to have and that I feel that I've earned. Now, that being said, sometimes we still have to interact with, people from other companies and sometimes other cultures. And one of the things I've noticed is, if there are cultures at play where women don't have the status that they do, say, here in America, or are not considered as independent, those are sometimes situations where it's been genuinely hard for me to get respect. So I've experienced things like being in a chat and all the men are talking back and forth, but every question I asked was being ignored, or even being told when I had input or was trying to interact that I could go talk to my male project manager who actually wouldn't have had the background or the technical knowledge to participate in that conversation. It was
Right.
almost like a go talk to your dad and let him, I can talk through him.
Yeah.
um, that was difficult for me. That one brought me to tears, to
Yeah.
be honest. And so, but I am glad to say that I think even that situation has turned around quite a bit. Having gotten the opportunity to really get hands on, they kind of had no option but to be in the trenches with me for a while. And I think now all that's dissipated. But
Right.
certainly, it can still come up, even though I do have the good fortune of, like I said, my day to day circumstances. The other thing I would say about that is, even in the past, in the journey leading up to this, one of the things that I found that I think we want to be most aware of is the things that do happen tend to be subconscious. I don't think I've really come across too many people that want to be disrespectful, or treat me in a negative way because I'm a woman. I don't think I've run into that. But I do think I've run into situations where it's happening and it's not being realized. Like it's an
Right.
unconscious bias. And those are the ones I have the most concern about, because if somebody's not even aware it's happening, of course, how can you change it? But
Right.
unfortunately, the effect of it can still be as negative, whether the intent, behind it was there or not. So that is something that I would like to see kind of us as a community and a society, women and men included, keep our awareness of, right? Like if we have a woman in the group, especially when she has, the skills and the know-how, not necessarily relegating her to the scribe, right? The note taker in the group, but giving her the role that would contribute the same as anyone else, or things like, and I'm speaking to some things that have happened to me, these examples that I'm given, or not even think to include this person in a meeting, or things like that, or maybe interrupting or talking over or not letting the ideas get out. Sometimes I think those things are more subtle and can happen due to more of an unconscious bias. And I think that's probably where we've gotten to today, where we have to still watch out for something like that.
Right. No, I think you're right. I think it's going to take, people being advocates, right? I think that people need to, I think that the behavior needs to become more normalized. I think that everyone needs to treat everyone equally and everyone needs to observe that. And then I also think that it's important that we still have people like you who are doing what you're doing, right? Which is, you're coming to the table with all these skills. Gender has nothing to do with it. You are great at your job. And the reason that you were able to turn that situation around was because, these people did probably have either a bias or an unconscious bias, but spending time with you opened their eyes and made them realize, hey, she knows exactly what she's doing. She knows her job. And I think that makes all the difference. Um, I really
Can I
appreciate
say
you
one
sharing.
more thing about
Oh,
that?
please. Yeah, please do.
Yeah, sorry. One more thought that kind of popped into my mind as you were saying that, because, and I think another thing too that's helpful, like if I were to speak to other, and not even just women, but anybody out there who's maybe experiencing those similar types of circumstances, one of the things that have helped me, even though it can feel a little bit uncomfortable in the moment, but the sooner you do it, the better, is really addressing it right away. So if somebody's not thinking to include you in a meeting, hey, you have that meeting. Do you mind if I join that? Can you add me to that invite? And once I did that, it wasn't forgotten again. But had I not spoken up right there at the beginning, I would have continued to be left out of the loop had I not said something. Once I
Yeah.
said something, it was fine. Same with, if you're in a meeting and you're trying to get an idea out, hey, what, can we circle back? I do want to finish the thought, and kind of putting it back in there and not allowing ourselves to kind of be, even if it's by accident, be dismissed or, have our voice minimized.
Right.
And I think that the sooner we can do that, and there's diplomatic ways to do it, right? We don't have to be aggressive or angry or hostile about it, but there's diplomatic ways we can do it. And the sooner that we do, I think kind of the longer of a way it goes in reducing those experiences. People kind of realize it sooner and view you
Right.
differently.
Right. Yeah. No, I totally agree with you on that. I think the challenge there is that I've listened to you do that before. I've heard you sort of correct people, and you do it in a it's firm, but it's professional, right? It's not aggressive and it's effective, right? I mean, you're really good at sort of opening people's eyes, making them go, oh, right. Um, but that's you. So one of the concerns that I have is that not everybody is comfortable doing that. And that's why I think it's important to have those advocates, right? So I would want people to listen to this conversation and say, hey, I hear what Deawna is saying, and that all makes sense. And if I observe that myself, and the victim, if you will, is not as assertive, as Deawna is, then I'll speak up and I'll say something on that person's behalf. I think that's important too. Um, so listen,
Agreed.
I definitely want to thank you for your time today, because I think that you've been a terrific colleague over the past several years. Um, I really appreciate and I value your partnership and your friendship. We started to talk to each other a couple of years back, and we were navigating the B2B commerce API and troubleshooting LWCs, just sort of basic stuff, right? And then you flash forward a couple of years later, 3 years later, maybe even less than 3 years later, and we're working side by side on some pretty gnarly implementations. I mean, like, we're doing some good stuff, right? And just seeing where you were 3 years ago to where you are now, it's extraordinary. I mean, your skill set has grown dramatically in a very, very short period of time. But I think that one of the things that's really compelling, and one of the things that I'm so grateful for, is that your skill set has grown so much, and your comfort level in this industry is so solid that you and I were working on a very high profile, very large enterprise client, and my role shifted sort of without notice. And suddenly I was taken away from, being more of a technical lead on a project and being more of a DevOps engineer. And then you were in, I think, more as like a developer support kind of a role. Like I think that you were going to come in and focus primarily on just development tasks, but instead you came in and quite comfortably assumed that developer lead role. And I mean, that's no small task. It's not just the hands-on development, but it's all the things that come with it. So communicating with the client, working on documentation, connecting the dots, and when gaps are identified. You've done so well at that, Deawna, and I just wanted to comment on that on this video and just say thank you so much for not only your partnership but your friendship too. And so what I mean by that is it's been very difficult for me creatively to put these videos together lately. And I really like that, you're like, well, you're doing it anyway, pal. I mean, you pretty much dragged me in front of my camera and said, we're doing this, and put it on my calendar, and here we are. So I really appreciate that as well. Thank you so much for all that. And I really enjoyed working with you, and I'm looking forward to continuing to do so for the years to come.
Well, and now it's my turn. I get to tell you
Oh,
how
good.
much I absolutely have appreciated you as a mentor. You've been absolutely amazing. And I think one of the things we all have to be grateful for when you get growth like that in your journey, it's when you have people like you, Mike Chandler, that support us in that journey. So thank you so much for all the
Well,
opportunities you help bring my way.
I thank you for saying that. This is just a big love fest. Group hug, group virtual hug. Thank you for your
Yay.
time, Deawna. Thank you so much.
Sounds
I
good.
appreciate it.